All right, let's talk about one of the most famous, most chilling stories in all of history, the curse of King Tutankhamun. I mean, you've heard the stories, right? A pharaoh's vengeful spirit reaching out from beyond the grave. But is that what really happened? Or is there something else going on entirely? So, I want you to picture this. We're in Cairo. The year is 1923. Inside a lavish room at the Continental Hotel, a wealthy British aristocrat is fighting for his life. He's got this raging fever, and every breath is a struggle. And then, at exactly 1:55 in the morning, he's gone. He takes his last breath. Now, this isn't just anybody. This is Lord Carnarvon, the man who financed the whole expedition, the guy who made the discovery of King Tut's tomb possible just a few months earlier. But his death? Well, his death is just the beginning. Because then something weird happens. At the exact instant Carnarvon dies, the entire city of Cairo is plunged into absolute darkness, a total blackout. And the electric company, they have no idea why. But it gets even stranger. Thousands of miles away, back home in England, Lord Carnarvon's favorite dog, a fox terrier named Susie, suddenly starts howling like crazy and then just collapses and dies. So you've got a dead lord, a citywide blackout, and a dead dog an ocean away. I mean, come on, that's the perfect recipe for a legend, right? And that's exactly what happened. These incredibly eerie events kicked off a media frenzy and gave birth to a story that has absolutely terrified people for a century, the Pharaoh's Curse. Pretty soon, newspapers all over the globe were printing this terrifying warning. They claimed it was carved on a clay tablet right at the entrance to the tomb. The story went that the lead archaeologist, a guy named Howard Carter, actually found it and hid it from his workers so they wouldn't just pack up and leave in terror. And just like that, the whole world was watching, just waiting to see who the curse would strike next. And you know what? They didn't have to wait long. The deaths started piling up. An American financier who visited the tomb, dead from a fever. Carnarvon's own brother, the radiologist who literally x-rayed the mummy. A secretary whose father then died by suicide. I mean, it was just relentless. By 1929, the list of the dead who had some link to the tomb had ballooned to 22 people, and every single death was another massive headline, just pouring gasoline on the fire. So the legend of the curse seemed pretty much undeniable, right? But was it actually real? Let's start peeling back the layers of this myth and really look at the facts. What if all these spooky connections and creepy coincidences weren't quite what they seem to be? Let's take a much closer look at the evidence that kicked this whole legend off. Okay, first up, that super dramatic citywide blackout. Well, it turns out that in the Cairo of the 1920s, the electrical grid was, to put it mildly, not great. Power outages were a totally normal, almost daily thing. So it was just pure random chance that one happened right at that moment. And what about the dog? Well, as soon as you factor in the time zones, that story kind of falls apart too. See, Carnarvon died at 1:55 a.m. in Cairo, which is actually just before midnight in the UK. His dog, it died 4 hours later. Definitely sad, for sure, but not some simultaneous supernatural event. A lot of these stories were just flat out sensationalized for clicks, or, for newspaper sales. Take the claim that a little mark on the mummy's cheek was a perfect match for the infected mosquito bite that killed Lord Carnarvon. This amazing proof was published by a newspaper that was absolutely furious its rival, The Times, had gotten exclusive rights to the whole tomb story. It wasn't journalism, it was just bitter competition. But here it is. This is the biggest shocker of all. That chilling inscription, the one about death on swift wings, it never existed. It was totally, 100% fake. Years and years later, one of the original security guards from the dig admitted that a journalist just kept bugging them about curses. The team never found one, but they also didn't really deny it either. A little smile, a non-answer, and that was all it took for the reporter to invent the most famous curse in history. So, okay, if there was no real curse, what's the deal with all the deaths? Well, the answers, it turns out, are a lot more scientific and a lot less supernatural. So one theory points to a biological culprit. Researchers have found that some of these ancient sealed tombs can be breeding grounds for dangerous molds, like this one, Aspergillus niger. This stuff can survive for thousands of years, and if you breathe it in, especially if you already have a weak immune system, it can cause some really nasty respiratory infections. And we really have to remember what year it was. Lord Carnarvon was already in pretty poor health to begin with. In fact, that's why he was in Egypt. The cold, damp winters in London were just too hard on him. And in 1923, way before we had antibiotics like penicillin, an infected mosquito bite wasn't just some minor annoyance. It could easily lead to fatal blood poisoning.
But maybe the most powerful piece of evidence against the curse comes from a 2002 study in the British Medical Journal. It's fascinating. Researchers compared the lifespans of the people who actually went inside the tomb against those who were there but stayed outside. And the result? There was no real difference. In fact, the people who were exposed to the so-called curse lived to an average age of 73, which was actually longer than the average life expectancy for their social class at the time.
And this really points to the biggest, most obvious flaw in the whole curse theory. If this thing was real, wouldn't it have gone after the people who were most involved? You'd think so, right? But Lord Carnarvon's own daughter, Lady Evelyn, who was one of the very first people to step inside that tomb, she lived to be 78. The doctor who performed the autopsy on the mummy lived to be 87. And what about target number 1, Howard Carter himself, the guy who literally broke the seal and disturbed the pharaoh's eternal rest? He lived for another 16 years after his incredible discovery and died of natural causes at 64. Whenever anyone asked him about the curse, he'd always say the same thing: I am still alive. So the curse was a media invention, a spooky story that got out of hand. But the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb did have this profound, almost magical effect. It just wasn't the one anyone was expecting. To really get this, we need to understand a core belief of the ancient Egyptians. For them, a person only truly died when the last person who spoke their name was gone. So to speak the name of the dead was, in a very real sense, to make them live again. And here's the beautiful irony of this whole story. King Tut, he wasn't some all-powerful pharaoh. He was a boy king, ruled for a short and pretty chaotic time. In fact, his successors thought he was so unimportant that they literally erased his name from their official king lists and chiseled it off monuments. For 3,000 years, he was completely forgotten. So, by his own culture's definition, he was well and truly dead. Howard Carter's discovery didn't unleash a curse on anyone. It did the exact opposite for the king. It resurrected Tutankhamun from total obscurity and made this forgotten boy king the single most famous pharaoh in the history of the world. His name is now known by millions upon millions of people. The discovery didn't curse him. It ensured his name would never be forgotten, granting him the very immortality his culture valued above everything else. So in a perfect twist of fate, the man who kept saying, "I am still alive," actually gave that incredible gift to his king.